Welcome to Own Your Zone podcast, where we feature venture capitalists, innovators, angels, and other investors who create positive impact globally. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm JiNan Glasgow, George. I'm a patent attorney and founder of NeoIP. I'm a law firm helping clients maximize their return on investment for patent assets. Also host of this show, Own Your Zone, where we feature venture capitalists, private equity, angel investors, and innovators. This episode is brought to you by NeoIP, where we help companies increase their valuation and protect their business through strategic assets based in intellectual property. We provide IP legal services at NeoIP to help companies develop strategic patent portfolios and to monetize their IP assets. We help innovators impact society for good by transforming their ideas into assets and connecting innovators to the resources that they need. I'm so thrilled today to have Dr. Connor Glass on our show. He is an MD, but also founder and CEO of Phantom Neuro. Welcome, Connor.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. Well, first of all, let's get the obvious out of the way. You're an MD, but you're also an entrepreneur. Tell us about your origin story of this transformation of what seemed to be one career and morphed into another.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a little bit unique, especially in the medical realm, where most people that go on to get their MD then go on to practice clinical medicine, where I haven't done that. So I've always been interested in surgery and clinical medicine, but then also in the future of humanity and kind of, futurist thinking about where will things be far out into the future in terms of how we interact with technology and human capability and all of that. And so as I started to go through my career and went through medical school, I saw that there was a convergence of these two things. So surgery plus kind of capability and futurist type stuff within plastic surgery. And not necessarily the cosmetic plastic surgery everyone thinks of, but the reconstructive side, at least for my own personal interests, in terms of reconstructing the human body in the setting of injury and largely traumatic injury that somehow limits it. And so I thought that I wanted to be a plastic surgeon that does all these really cool advanced surgeries. I went to Johns Hopkins to do a research fellowship in plastic surgery to study some of these things with the intention of going on to residency to do that. But then I got interested in the technology side of it and translating an idea from academia out into an actual product in the commercial environment and how it's actually really difficult to do that. And noticed that a lot of what I wanted for the future of humanity and my interests were reliant on commercial implementation of academic, findings, and that there aren't that many people working on that. And so I did a pivot, came up with this technology that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, and started a company and been off to the races ever since.
Everybody is different, but it's certainly clear like you're on a calling that is unique, that is sort of one of a kind. And what a perfect time to be doing it, right? We, as we talked about very briefly, my law firm NeoIP and our software patent forecast, we watch evolution of technology and science as embodied in patents. And so one area that we've tracked a little bit is the brain-machine interface. And so you're not quite doing that, but you are really trying to make prosthetics more realistic, right? Talk to us about your technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's in the same field. I would classify it as brain-computer interfaces. So putting some kind of sensors in the brain or on top of the brain or around the brain to harness the signals and maybe stimulate. So we're doing the same thing, but we're harnessing muscle. So the way that intact limbs are controlled is via muscle. Muscle too generates electrical activity. And so we're picking up the electrical activity from muscle in a amputation stump or injured limb, and then using that electrical activity to drive control of robotic prosthetics or robotic assisted solutions. And so it's within the same field of neurotechnology. And we're fortunate to live in a time where all these advancements are possible and it's all kind of converging together.
Yeah, for sure. So I love that you are also concerned about the commercialization of it, because it's one thing to transform ideas into assets as intellectual property, as happens very often in university settings. But then the step from lab to market is a big chasm. So talk to us about how you are crossing that, and what do you imagine the timeline is like to really make this impact commercially?
Yeah, so it's really difficult, and that's what I didn't expect when I went into the academia side of things, was how difficult it was to go from an idea or even human studies and demonstrating an idea to an actual commercial product that's scalable, that your average person with whatever injury can benefit from, and that there's a lot of stuff that gets put out in the media or news articles or publications that make it seem as if these academic advancements are, on the cusp of being available to everybody. And if you lose your limb, you're going to get a Luke Skywalker arm and your life is maybe even going to be better than it was before. Yet then if you look at the statistics, and for upper limb amputation in particular, most people aren't even using prosthetic limbs. And if they are, they're using far simpler hook-based prosthetic limbs that a lot of people are familiar with. And so there's this massive chasm between the two. And what I also recognize going through it is that it's really hard to get an idea out of academia in terms of IP, logistics, raising capital for very grandiose ideas. There's all these things that have to happen and have to go right to even have a shot at success in a commercial venture. And, the odds are certainly stacked against you, just at baseline, much less an academic-based startup. So it's a challenge.
I imagine it is. A lot of times what we see with spin-out technology, if you will, from university settings, is there is always innovation that happens beyond that in the startup. Are you cultivating your own intellectual property? Are you innovating beyond that? I imagine you are.
Absolutely. So you don't know a ton about something when you're first creating a product. So we started off with a kitchen sink type of patent where you put a whole bunch of stuff in there, everything we can envision, and we'll see what comes out. But then as you start the company and you move forward, you start to refine your idea, and then you can go into more detailed design patents and things like that to make it, I guess, more defensible, but also stronger IP. And so we've been working on a lot of that and licensing some patents, but generating our own as we come up with new ideas and further refine our existing ones.
Yeah. Talk about your team a little. It's also, as an entrepreneur, you really have to pull a team together to make this work.
Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer in surround yourself with people that are much smarter than yourself, which is pretty easy for myself to do. Mm-hmm. And so I, from day one, recognized that this venture was going to require really smart people, lots of connections, to have any chance of success. And so I partnered with some really incredible people, both within the Hopkins ecosystem. So I was very fortunate to be within that ecosystem, to be able to leverage a lot of those connections. But then also reaching out to various commercial entities to try to partner with them early on so that I could have a sense of, what's the roadmap for accomplishing something like this when I have no business background. I didn't really know how to start a company or do anything. You just kind of fake it till you make it and go ahead at it. And so I built up a team of partners and advisors and all of that, and then slowly built up my actual employee team, which we're up to, I think, 9 people now, full-time employees. So the team's grown extremely rapidly over the past year, and there's a lot of people involved in this.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, congratulations on that. That inertia of just doing it, just getting it started is impossible for many people. So you're in an elite group already of entrepreneurs who are making it and fundraising and moving something to commercial impact for sure. Let's talk about AI for a little bit, because I note in a lot of our IP research and patent forecasts, like AI seems to be infiltrating everything from medical diagnostics to cybersecurity. It just seems to be everywhere. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing with AI integration into your work or peripheral areas.
Yeah, so everything that we do is totally reliant on AI or machine learning, or I'm not exactly sure what the difference even is between the two. I don't know that anybody knows, but we harness machine learning in order to take these biological signals, this electrical activity that we record, and then convert it into some intention of the user, right? So if they close their fist or they want to close their fist, we have to pick up some electrical activity and then decode it and basically tell the prosthetic, hey, they're trying to close their fist, close the fist of the prosthetic. And so that decoding process is all machine learning based and algorithm based, where you detect patterns in this electrical activity for the purpose of command formation for these robotic solutions. And so that's what a lot of neurotechnology relies on in terms of artificial intelligence, but then also standardizing ways of figuring out how to process the electrical signal. So there's all these different layers that artificial intelligence allows you to be more effective at in terms of that. So it's a different kind of AI as compared to ChatGPT or something like that most people are now familiar with. So it's a totally different use case. But all these advancements in AI and also in microprocessors and what's capable on a cell phone or on your laptop, all these things coming together at once really allows you to accomplish some incredible things.
It's so fascinating for sure. And amazing what you're doing already. And thanks for all the efforts you're putting into it. Is it customized for each person? Is it bespoke? I imagine a human being has some range of electrical signals for their muscles, muscle size, et cetera. But is it something that is truly customized to the person? That's where the ML comes in, machine learning comes in, or is there a standardization that can help this scale, or both?
So both. So it's very similar to voice recognition. So for voice recognition, really with the output, electrical output, if you imagine a voice kind of signal going, it's very similar to a EMG, so muscle signal output. You can think about it similarly. And so the general architecture of what the signals look like, the types of patterns that you can recognize, all of that, speaking about voice recognition, that's pretty consistent across all people when you're speaking. But then there's a certain amount of it that is fine-tuned to the individual to recognize your specific voice rather than just a human voice. And so there's a little bit of learning for each person that goes on, or a decent amount of learning that goes on for each person, but it's all built up on this framework that kind of is broadly applicable to the majority of people.
Awesome. Now, I know that obviously you're based here in the US, you're based in Texas, but I think I read that you have some international perspective as well. Is your target market right now based in the US, or do you think this is something that can ultimately scale globally and be affordable for any amputee, anyone who has been a victim of war, trauma, or needs it? Talk a little bit about your vision there for international impact.
Yeah, so it will start off locally here in the United States, but absolutely the goal is to have this technology be widely accessible and as cheap as we can make it to the public, right? So we're going for broad impact as compared to a more orphan drug type of approach where you have to charge really high dollars for each unit to be able to sustain yourself. We'd rather sell them for cheaper and then sell a whole bunch of them. And so at first, it's very difficult, right? Because you have very few units that you're building and it's new technology and things are expensive. But over time, as things become more, seamless and integrated and miniaturized and whatnot, the goal is to get the price down very low to the point that it is very much accessible outside of the US in different types of economic environments. And then also the safety of what we're doing allows for that as well. So when you're talking about an implant that goes essentially under the skin in an amputation stump, that's very different from a brain-computer interface, for example, where you're putting something into the brain. So you can imagine that the infrastructure required to get something like what we're talking about, a muscle-directed implant, is very small compared to a massive surgical suite and trained neurosurgeon and all of that for a brain-computer interface or any other type of highly invasive technology. And so that too will allow for this to be implanted in situations where there isn't a ton of operating infrastructure and highly skilled surgeons and that kind of stuff.
Love that. I love that. And I love your vision to scale and make it accessible to more people who need it. What's your vision on longevity? I realize you're talking about people who need to have perhaps additional control over limbs that are augmented, but what's your vision on longevity? Is there a longer play here for better health, better term? People obviously have knee surgeries. I think knee, hip, and shoulder are hitting all the baby boomers now in the US. What are your thoughts on longevity and quality of life beyond, if any? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the implications of technology like this are broad sweeping with respect to longevity or improved health span. So you have health span versus lifespan.
Yeah.
Health span is living well and happily and doing what you want. Lifespan is, you could be bedridden for 10 years, but that wouldn't be part of your health span. So it's about how do you expand somebody's health span? And so let's take lower limb instability due to aging, for example. So as you age, everybody's lower limbs start to work not as well as they would hope that they would. And that leads to falls and XYZ. Yeah. And so there's a world in which you would be able to harness robotic technologies and exoskeletons. Today, we picture these big, bulky exoskeletons, but the technology is getting very slim and low profile and really impressive. So there's a future in which elderly individuals will harness exoskeletons, and they'll need some control mechanism that's intuitive to do that, but that will allow them to continue walking when they're 80 years old as if they're 50 years old. Because most people just want to be able to go on walks with their children, grandchildren, do their activities of daily living. So we're not talking about necessarily an 80-year-old going out and running a marathon, but it's about how do you allow individuals to still continue to live their lives. And also there's the added benefit of being more mobile leads to less comorbidities. Yes. And so by having someone be more mobile and out and about, they're also going to extend their health span indirectly, not necessarily just due to this exoskeleton.
Yeah, I love that. I have understood that the quality of life is so dependent for elderly on just being able to sit and stand, to get in and out of a chair, in and out of a car, to be mobile in and out of your bed. And so that's pretty exciting. What do you think is the implementation on this sort of exoskeleton? Is it 5 years? Is it 10? What do you think?
I think it's probably 10 to 15-ish years out. So I think the robotics side of things is incredible. I mean, we have some really incredible robotic technologies out there. Now there's a bunch of issues with it and figuring out how do you power these things for a long time, all that. But everyone's seen Boston Dynamics or I don't know.
Those are spooky a little bit.
All these different robotics, but absolutely spooky. But the robotics that humans can create are just absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah. And so that's pretty well figured out. But now it's about, okay, how do you merge the person with that robotic technology to actually give a significant net benefit to their life? And so that's the difficult part that us and others are trying to work on. That takes time to go through the FDA regulatory process and the testing. And so I think that that's, on the 10, 15-year time horizon.
10, 15. All right. That's interesting. I know I'm an optimist, so I'll look for it a little bit sooner for sure.
Yeah, hopefully sooner.
Yeah. Who are some other companies who are working in this sort of neurotech space that you admire, that you think are interesting, that should be on our radar?
There's quite a few. I guess a handful that people know well is BlackRock Neurotech. So they have the most individuals with brain implants to date. The vast majority, 90+% of people that ever see brain implants, I think, have BlackRock's implants. So they're kind of the founding fathers of it. There's Neuralink, Elon Musk's brain implant company that everybody has heard of. And so I particularly admire that company for the fact that it has brought so much notoriety to this field, right? So for better or for worse, everybody can argue different sides, but having Elon and having this company in the field brings a lot of notoriety and interest to it. And so that's only good for the field and raising capital and all that. So just purely from that perspective, I definitely admire them. There's Synchron, which I think is an incredible company doing a really unique thing where they're going through the blood vessels to get to the brain and trying to record from a stent that has electrodes built in. And then there's others as well. There's Paradromics here locally in Austin. all kinds of stuff. So the majority of people are in the brain computer interface. And that's also a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is those are all really fantastic and great, but there's a lot of people that don't want a brain implant. And so what about them? What about these different types of injuries? And so something like what we're working on should be much more amenable to these various people that don't have central nervous system.
More important, right? Because it's addressing such a great need. There are so many people who have prosthetics that could be advantaged by this right away. I mean, we even have seen it at High Point University, where I'm IP expert in residence. The Steve Wozniak, the WOZ project, has been working on brain-machine interface with students for autonomous vehicles. But our own bodies, like just being able to manage that. You mentioned something about power, right? And the robotics. Talk a little bit about the power implications here. Is it all really the electrical energy of the muscles, or do you require external power?
So the electrical activity of the muscles isn't driving any of the control in this setting. It's purely we're recording a signal and decoding it, and then we send a command. So the power is generated from the batteries that are on board for all of these things. And so we're really just creating a wireless neural connection from the limb directly into the prosthetic itself. But getting back to this power issue, it's more so what I'm talking about is the batteries and creating batteries that are not super heavy, that can last for hours at a time. That's still something that...
Yeah, so many in the military have to use mobile power for comms, and they're heavy, and you almost have to be sort of a very in shape military person to carry, the load of that, and then recharge, obviously, et cetera. But seems like lighter batteries better. Battery technology always improving. Talk about human augmentation for a minute, because it seems like there's an extension. You mentioned futurist. You are a bit of a futurist. So what's your vision here on human augmentation more broadly?
Yeah. So I think technology, like all of these in the neurotech field, potentially can radically change what it means to be human in a way, if for good, right? So there's definitely a bias towards this dystopian type of thing because of Terminator or various shows out there in the ether. But really, I view it as a massive change for good to expand human capability. So your cell phone is a massive source of human augmentation, right? So what you can accomplish now as a single human with your cell phone has augmented humans' productivity exponentially. And what we're able to accomplish within a day. So when we're talking about brain-computer interfaces or other muscle-machine interfaces, whatever it might be, it's really about, how do you recreate or augment some function? And so recreating one's ability to walk, so an elderly individual recreating their lost ability to walk is no different than enhancing somebody's ability to walk, way down the road. And so I think we are moving towards a future where things like that will be possible. It will be a very slow and gradual progression. I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing by any means, but we will be able to kind of embody the technology around us, this kind of Internet of Things, as we start to harness some of these technologies. And it's already started with our cell phones. So it may sound scary, but we're already there.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And who would want to be without their cell phones today, right?
Absolutely.
People, or at least maybe we'll take a walk without it.
Yeah.
So on a fun side, do you imagine there being some athletic augmentation? Like, do you envision that there might be sports competitions and like those with the best robotic human interfaces win?
So on a personal level, yes, I think that things like that would be extremely interesting, right? What if one day there's an Olympics where, it is as highly regulated as it is today, but then also there's an Olympics where it's like, okay, all bets are off.
Yeah.
Do whatever you are comfortable doing. That's legal, so on and so forth. And then let's see what happens. I think that that's a possibility in the future for sure. And it's going to be extremely interesting.
Yeah. Well, you've given us a lot to hope for, a lot to imagine for today, and a lot to look forward to. And so we appreciate all the work that you are doing, Connor. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to ask you one more question. Tell me about looking ahead to the future. What's one thing that really excites you and that scares you?
That's a great question. So I'm really excited about the future of humanity because of all these advancements. ChatGPT is the most prominent one currently, but I think all of these things are going to be a net positive for society, and that humans are very adaptable, and we'll probably find, similar to cell phones again, that we'll wonder how we ever lived without it on the other end. So I'm incredibly optimistic about what the future holds for us in that sense. And what's something that scares me? That's a little bit harder. So I guess regulation of these things, I guess the flip side of that, I think that, with amazing advancements also comes a responsibility to do things in a morally and ethically positive way. And that, I don't think the governments are well set up to regulate things that are novel and, that most people don't know anything about. And so I guess I would be a little bit worried that, our regulation on things will lag behind technological advancement in a potentially detrimental way. But overall, again, I think the net positive is going to be good, but there probably will be bumps in the road, as there already have been moving forward.
Yeah, government and ethics always lag, I think.
Absolutely.
Really the science, but your optimism shines through today. So thanks for sharing that with us. And thanks for being on Own Your Zone. You clearly are owning your space, and you've given us some optimism for the future in your business. And I think overall for this sector, the neurobiotech, if you will. How can people find you online, find your company?
So we're most active on LinkedIn. You can look us up at Phantom Neuro. And then we also have a website, www.phantomneuro.com. And so those are the best places to find us.
Thanks so much, Connor. It's been a joy having you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Own Your Zone podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.